Hi everyone, welcome to the show. So the first piece of information comes from the Wall Street Journal. It says Expeditors International shuts down computer systems after a cyber attack. Now this happened on February 22nd, but this company is critical for U.S. supply chains, right? So there's already a stress on the global supply chain, and now this company gets cyber attacked. Now, we're in this conflict with Russia, and we just sanctioned Russia for their involvement in the Ukraine. And what Russia is infamous for is cyber attacks. Now, it would make a lot of sense that they would go after our supply chain. So this piece of information says that that one of the most critical companies that uses supply chain software was cyber attacked, right? And you may say, oh, well, it came out on February 22nd. Well, I did some digging, and it doesn't look like it's been resolved either. 2 days later, there's still the problem of the cyber attack. And also, I'd like to mention that supply chains, there's a lag, right? You're not just getting the goods and instantly going to the store. There's a lag in that process now because this point has failed, right? So you want to be careful. You want to make sure that you have everything you need, because it's very possible that over the next coming weeks that the store shelves are especially bare. So, everyone do what you need to do to make sure that you have everything that you need. So just want to bring that to everyone's attention. The next piece of information is Todd McDonald. Todd McDonald works at R3. Now listen to what he has to say.
The industry is hard at work on trying to figure out how they can bring regulated digital currency to market.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to do it. We're working directly with central banks on their digital currency projects, BRICS Bank, others, in Kazakhstan and some other places, and that's going to continue. But there's a growing sentiment where what is the near term? What's possible in the more than near term? So in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay. Oh.
So is it? The one thing I like to say is, like, even if central banks are on an accelerated timeline, they're still on a central bank timeline.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense, because they have to definitely, measure twice and cut once, that expression. So they have to make sure that they're very purposeful in how they move forward. There's so many second, third order risks to all this stuff. So are there ways to bring the other side of this trade to market? So there are lots of digital asset networks coming online that we're involved in, others are involved in. So how do we help bring regulated settlement to those networks? How can we potentially bring something that's maybe close to what central bank digital currency will be, but something that can be live in the next sort of quarters as opposed to years? So that's I find that that was part of why the business trip. It's great to see people again.
Yeah.
Nice to be with human beings instead of video screens. But it was also the topic of conversation is really picking up again on this stuff.
All right, so the central banks are on an accelerated time frame. He said 12 to 18 months that the central banks are pushing for central bank digital currencies. Then he said on the opposite side of the trade, you have these digital asset networks. And what he's saying is the central bank digital currencies can go on the digital asset networks. And we've seen this in Palau, right? What Palau's central bank digital currency is an IOU on the XRP ledger. Now, these central banks are picking up the timeline, right? And they don't have time to design a whole CBDC for their national infrastructure. They could just shortcut that and go directly to the crypto networks and issue their own tokens that have the central bank backing. So a central bank could just back a gateway on the XRP ledger, and this is possible for any crypto that you may be in that's massive and has a bunch of partnerships and everything like that. If there's a whole network of banks on a specific crypto, right, all the central bank has to do is issue tokens on that network, similar to like USDC, but instead they just make their own coin that's on that ledger. So this is very exciting news, in my opinion. And 12 to 18 months, if imagine a national currency is being issued on crypto asset networks, the central bank's money going right onto the crypto networks. I mean, that's a huge vote of confidence for all of crypto if they start doing that. And if this is an accelerated timeline, like let's see how this all plays out. I'm very excited to hear that. The next piece of information is iTrustCapital. iTrustCapital is a sponsor of the show. They make this show possible. So iTrust.capital/Darren. If you use this link, you get $100 funding reward just for using the link. iTrust has a whole plethora of digital assets that you can invest in, as well as precious metals, gold, silver. And they're making crypto IRAs, precious metals IRAs for your retirement. And there's tax advantages, and they're tax-free in an IRA. So be sure to check out iTrustCapital. Be sure to use my link if you decide to use them. Be sure to research IRAs. I think there's a big opportunity here, so be sure to check them out. So the next piece of information is BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now listen to what he has to say.
After 1 minute. So far, the way we are discussing with among other banks at NIBM or at IDRBT, we are looking at these kind of use cases, right? Cross-border payment. Some of the banks are already implemented with the help of R3s and Ripple. Decentralized KYC, which we are working on. CBDC, everybody is now aware how RBI and the FinTech department of RBI looking at. Non-fungible tokens and a DeFi are these two use cases will be geared up, maybe in my view, at the end of this year. Considering some of the banks, maybe we can look at how can we distribute our NFTs of our gold loan certificates or any of those things. Next level digital identity, trade finance will take a lot of time. Although there is some work is happening on Aadhaar consent mechanism.
All right, so the first thing that he mentions is Ripple and R3 are working with banks in India. We know that David Schwartz spoke at a national Indian conference where specifically geared towards tech. We know that Bhutan, their digital currency, is a federated sidechain of the XRP ledger. And the Bhutan dollar is backed by the Indian rupee. We know that there's a lot of activity with Mojo Loop in these areas as well. So it's pretty interesting that he also mentioned gold NFTs, right? So if you don't remember, there's, I'll get into that later, but remember the gold NFTs India is also working on. But he specifically mentions Ripple and R3, and then he talks about decentralized KYC, where that's what I've been talking about by sovereign digital identities, where you own your own identity. So SPFS is Russians' SWIFT system. So they built a system similar to SWIFT, and this came out in 2014. That's when the U.S. sanctioned Russia before, when they invaded Ukraine in 2014. They were able to create their own type of SWIFT. So the whole significance of ISO messaging, right? So ISO is the message that's written in a certain format that's universally accepted. So if there's SWIFT systems emerging, Russia's creating their own SWIFT system. SIPS, which is the Chinese version of SWIFT, is another one of these, and there's more than this. If they're all using the same messaging standard, they're able to move payments through one system to the next system, as well as the settlement instructions are written into those payments. So with everything that's happening with sanctions, right, we're censoring the dollars, which I've talked about in my last video. We're censoring dollars, which is a lack of confidence for the dollars. But with ISO messaging, you're not attached to the dollar system. You're able to use any type of settlement assets. So the other thing is, with everything that's going on, the Fed has been speaking hawkish. They said they were going to raise interest rates. They said they were going to tighten. And look what's happened. Look what's happened. They've completely done the opposite. Their chart is just gone parabolic, right? So they said they were going to raise interest rates, they're going to tighten, but the exact opposite has happened. The other thing is Goldman Sachs thinks that geopolitical uncertainty further lowers the odds of a 50 basis point hike in March. everything that the Fed was saying has went out the window with this whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. So I found that pretty interesting. The other thing is, back to the gold NFTs, Russia's regulators will not legalize the use of Libra and are researching their own potential gold-backed digital currency. And this was an article written by Omfif that talks about this. And Omfif is, a reputable central banker type of organization that does all the latest research. So we have India talking about gold-backed NFTs, and we have Russia talking about gold-backed cryptocurrencies, digital currencies. Now, back to what I was saying about ISO messaging, right? The settlement layer could be anything. Like, once upon a time, gold was the reserve currency. Now, gold can be digitized and tokenized to a point where that could be used as a settlement vehicle. So if you have all these countries being censored from the dollar, right, and I'm not saying anything, the reasons why they're being sanctioned, I'm just saying they're censoring the dollar, and that's bad for confidence. What is the likely scenario from that? I think countries are going to move to censorship resistance settlement vehicles, which could be digital assets. It could be tokenized forms of gold on digital assets. It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other, but we're moving in that direction. And here's proof right here. India is exploring setting up rupee trade accounts with Russia to soften the blow on New Delhi of Western sanctions on Russia. And it looks like Russia and Belarus account for a third of India's total potash imports. And potash is an ingredient for fertilizer. So prior to potash, the food was at a shortfall. There was not much food in the world. And once modern day fertilizers came about, the whole human population exploded in growth from fertilizer because of food production. So what this is saying is India is kind of reliant on Russia's potash imports. So they can't just, cut another country off that they do trade with, especially when their whole country is living off of food that, somehow is tied to Russia. So they're looking to get around Western sanctions for potash, which would make sense if you need to feed everyone in your country, right? So that was pretty decent news, big news to me. Now, listen to Christine Lagarde.
As you know, whenever there is a ban, a prohibition, or a mechanism in place to boycott or prohibit, there are always criminal ways that will try to circumvent the prohibition or the ban, which is why it is so critically important that MiCA is pushed through as quickly as possible so that we have a regulatory framework within which crypto assets can actually be caught in a regulatory framework. And by the way, it's all very well to be in cryptos, but that's not it. You have to move from cryptos to stable coins to eventually fiat currency. Now, there are ways, whether DLT or not, to actually pierce that veil and to make sure that criminal activity is actually pursued and properly dealt with.
So the reporter asked her about sanctions, if Russia could bypass these sanctions with crypto. And what she's saying is that's why we need to push MiCA, which is the EU's version of crypto asset regulation. So we need to push these forward just to get in front of all of this. So this is accelerating the crypto timeline. And I think what I was saying before with Todd McDonald, I think that also plays with central banks pushing for this timeline to be happening faster too. So what she's saying is complementing what Todd McDonald said as well. And the other part of this is she's saying that the crypto regulations are going to be that point where they're able to see all the transaction and regulate the endpoints, the on and off ramps of crypto, the Coinbases, the Upholds. They're going to come down strict on those endpoints. So if you ever want to exit crypto, they're going to know exactly every transaction that you did in your wallet. So last video I spoke about this too with Canada, and I didn't mean anything by what I was saying about, I said I said, make sure to be careful with your crypto. I forget the exact quote, but some of you guys didn't like how I said it. But all I was saying with that is they're very strict with all this. Don't start donating to causes and not realizing, what the consequences of that could be. They have complete insight to every transaction that happens into wallets, right? They can verify all these transactions and make sure that you haven't sent any money to a blacklisted wallet. So I wasn't saying anything specific about the movement. What I was saying is be careful with what you do with crypto, because everything's trackable, and you don't want the problems that will come from doing something like that, where they think that you funded something you shouldn't have funded. That could lead to devastating consequences for you. So all I was saying was be smart. I wasn't specifically going after saying anything negative about any type of movement. The other thing is, I'm going to be careful on how I say this. I'll put the link in the description below, but it looks like there's a digital identity system that has already taken place in the US. So this goes into health records, and it kind of just slipped by everyone. So I'll add that in the link in the description below. Be sure to check it out. The other thing is what we're talking about, potash, wheat from all Russia producing regions will be cleared for export to China. So Russia has a vast amount of natural resources, while China's very strong in manufacturing. Now these two enemies of the U.S. have become closer and closer. So they both have central bank digital currencies. They're both, on the sanction. They're both in the targets of the sanction list. Russia especially, but they look like they're bypassing because they need to do trade together. People in China need to eat, and Russia's got a ton of wheat. So that was the other thing. The other thing was President Biden. On January 25th, the House took an important step forward today to advance the America's Compete Act of 2022. The bill will strengthen supply chains, American manufacture, and position the U.S. to outperform China and the rest of the world for the decades to come. And what did this report include? The implications of changes to the cross-border payment and financial messaging system. So before all this stuff happened, on January 25th, they've been preparing for it. And they say, review and analyze ways in which cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, which is China's version of SWIFT, crypto, and foreign central bank digital currencies could erode this system. Analyze how changes to global cross-border payment system could undermine U.S. national security interests, including impacts on the efficiency of sanctions, the countering of terrorist finance, and the enforcement of anti-money laundering provisions. So they've been preparing, Biden's recent thing with crypto, executive order for crypto, all that was kind of an extension of this bill where they put pressure on the regulators to actually regulate crypto. So like Lagarde said, like Tom McDonald said, they're pushing for these regulations to happen more rapidly because, geopolitics are intertwined with all of this. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please tell me what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Thanks, everyone.